Ambassador Park Jin walked into the massive council chamber one last time. The room was huge, with representatives from dozens of alien species sitting in curved rows that stretched up toward the ceiling. Some aliens looked like giant lizards, others like walking insects, and a few were just floating energy beings that glowed softly in the dim light. Jin had been coming to these meetings for 8 long months. Every single time, the aliens treated humans like annoying children who didn't belong at the adult table. Today was different, though. Today, Jin was done playing their games. He stepped up to the speaking platform in the center of the room. His black suit looked plain compared to the colorful robes and armor worn by the alien delegates, but Jin stood tall and confident, his dark eyes scanning the crowd. "Honored members of the Galactic Council," Jin began, his voice carrying clearly, "through the chamber's sound system, I stand before you today to make an announcement that will affect all of our futures." The reptilian Velkari delegate, a massive creature with green scales and yellow eyes, let out a loud hiss. "Are the baby humans finally ready to accept our generous terms?" he asked, his forked tongue flicking out mockingly. Jin didn't even look at him. Instead, he continued speaking in the same calm, steady voice. "After careful consideration, humanity has decided to withdraw from all peace negotiations and diplomatic relations with the Galactic Council, effective immediately." The chamber erupted. Aliens started shouting in dozens of different languages. Some banged their fists on their desks, while others made strange clicking and buzzing sounds that must have been their version of angry yelling. The insectoid hive queen, whose body was covered in shimmering purple chitin, stood up on her 6 legs. "You dare to walk away from us?" she screeched, her mandibles clicking angrily. "Your pathetic species has existed for barely a few thousand years. We have ruled the galaxy for millions of years. What makes you think you have any right to refuse our wisdom?" The ancient Primarch delegate, who looked like a walking tree made of crystal, nodded his massive head. "The young ones do not understand their place in the natural order. Perhaps a few decades of isolation will teach them proper respect, Yin." Listened to all of this without changing his expression. When the shouting died down, he spoke again. "For 8 months we have sat at this table. We have offered our knowledge, our resources, and our friendship. In return, you have called us children, primitives, and worse. You have demanded that we give up our independence and accept your rule without question." He paused, letting his words sink in. The chamber was completely quiet now. Even the energy beings had stopped their soft humming. "We came here hoping to join a community of equals," Jin continued. "Instead, we found a group of bullies who think age equals wisdom. You have made it clear that you see us as servants, not partners, so we choose to leave." Jin turned toward the exit, and the entire human delegation stood up with him. There were 12 humans in total, all wearing simple dark suits that made them look professional and dignified. The Velkari delegate hissed again. "You will regret this decision, primitive. Without our protection, your little empire will crumble within a year." Jin stopped walking and turned back one last time. His smile was cold and dangerous. "We'll see about that." Then he led his people out of the chamber, their footsteps echoing in the stunned silence they left behind. The news hit the galaxy like a lightning bolt. Within just a few hours of the human delegation walking out, everything started falling. Apart on the distant planet Kepler-7, the local hospital was in complete chaos. The head doctor, a tall blue-skinned alien named Vex, was frantically trying to contact Dr. Kim Yuna's medical research team on Earth. A deadly plague had broken out among the colonists, and they desperately needed the human-developed cure that had saved millions of lives across the galaxy. But when Vex tried to call, all he got was a polite automated message. "Human medical services are currently unavailable. Thank you for your understanding." "What do you mean unavailable?" Vex shouted at his communication device, but there was no response. He tried calling 12 different human medical facilities. Every single one gave him the same message. Meanwhile, on the agricultural world of New Harvest, something even worse was happening. The massive food production facilities that fed half the galaxy were shutting down one by one. Engineer Lee Minho had designed these incredible farming systems that could grow enough food to feed billions of people. The alien farmers had always just followed his instructions, without really understanding how the complex machinery worked. Now, with Lee and his team gone, the alien workers stood helplessly as the automated systems displayed error messages in human language that none of them could read. The crops that were supposed to feed 12 different planets would rot in the fields. But the real panic started when Captain Song Hana's voice came through the military communication channels. She was the human officer who had been quietly coordinating defense strategies for dozens of alien worlds. Her message was short and professional. All human military advisors are to return to human space immediately. Effective now, we are ending all defense partnerships with Galactic Council members. Admiral Krex of the Zentari Defense Force couldn't believe what he was hearing. Wait, you can't just leave. The Skarn Empire has been building up their forces on our border. We need your tactical expertise. But Song's response was ice cold. That is no longer our concern. Good luck. Across the galaxy, human advisors were packing up their equipment and heading home. These were the people who had been quietly running the computer systems, managing the supply chains, and coordinating the complex logistics that kept alien civilizations functioning smoothly. Back at the Galactic Council headquarters, Chancellor Vorthak was trying his best to act like nothing serious had happened. The ancient alien leader, who looked like a giant purple octopus wearing golden robes, waved his tentacles dismissively when younger delegates approached him with concerns. This is merely a childish tantrum, Vorthak announced to the emergency session. The humans will come crawling back within a week when they realize they need our protection and guidance. We should ignore their dramatic behavior and continue with our normal business, but the younger alien delegates weren't buying it. Representative Zara from the Centauri Coalition stood up, her silver scales shimmering with worry. Chancellor, we're getting reports of system failures across 17 sectors. The humans weren't just participants in our civilization, they were running critical parts of it. Nonsense, Vorthak boomed. We managed perfectly well for millions of years, before these upstart humans arrived. We'll manage just fine without them. However, even as he spoke, his own communication device was beeping with urgent messages from across the galaxy. Trade routes were in chaos, medical emergencies were going unanswered, military commanders were reporting that their coordination systems had gone dark. The truth was becoming obvious to everyone, except the stubborn old Chancellor. Humanity hadn't just been part of galactic civilization. Somehow, without anyone really noticing, they had become absolutely essential to keeping it running. The economic disaster started small, but it spread like wildfire across the galaxy. On the busy trade route between the Andromeda sector and the core worlds, merchant Captain Zelthar was getting increasingly frustrated. His cargo ship had been waiting at the jump point for 3 days now, and there was still no sign of the human freight convoy that was supposed to escort them through pirate-infested space. "Where are those human ships?" Zelthar muttered, tapping his claws nervously on his captain's chair. His ship was loaded with rare minerals worth millions of credits, but without the human escorts and their superior navigation systems, he didn't dare make the journey alone. The answer came through his communication system in the form of a pre-recorded message. All human commercial shipping operations have been suspended indefinitely. We apologize for any inconvenience. Zelthar wasn't the only one getting this message. Across the galaxy, thousands of alien merchants were discovering that the reliable human cargo ships they had depended on for years were simply gone. These weren't just any ships. They were fast, efficient, and most importantly, they never got lost or attacked by pirates. Human pilots had an almost magical ability to find the safest and quickest routes through space. The impact hit the Galactic Stock Exchange like a meteor. On the trading floor of the massive financial center on Centauri Prime, panic was setting in. Trader Vextar watched in horror as the holographic displays showed red numbers plummeting everywhere he looked. "This can't be right," he whispered, staring at the data. 30% of all galactic trade goes through human-operated stations and shipping networks. If they're really gone, he didn't need to finish the sentence. Everyone on the trading floor was thinking the same thing. The galactic economy was built on the assumption that goods could move freely and safely between star systems. Without the humans managing a third of that traffic, everything was grinding to a halt. But the worst was yet to come. In the secure underground vaults of the central banking network, alarms were blaring non-stop. The head of security, a nervous insectoid named Clicktar, was running between computer terminals trying to understand what was happening. "Sir, we're under massive cyber attack," his assistant reported, mandibles clicking with stress. "Someone is trying to break into the core financial systems." What Clicktar didn't understand was that the attack wasn't really an attack at all. For years, human programmers like Park Jinwoo and Lee Somin had quietly designed incredibly sophisticated security systems that protected the galaxy's money from hackers and criminals. These systems were so advanced that even the aliens who used them every day didn't really understand how they worked. Now, with the humans gone, those security systems were shutting down automatically. Without human oversight, the banking network was defenseless against the criminal organizations that had been trying to steal from it for years. On Nexus Station, the largest trading hub in known space, things were falling apart even faster. Station Commander Thexel stood in the central control room, watching helplessly, as one system after another started showing error messages. The problem was that Nexus Station was like a giant puzzle made up of technology from 50 different alien species. The Velkari had built the power systems, the Zentari had installed the weapons, the Hive had created the communication networks, and dozens of other species had contributed their own pieces. None of these technologies were designed to work together. They used different programming languages, different energy frequencies, and completely different ways of thinking about how machines should operate. It should have been impossible to make them all function as one unified system, but somehow, human technicians had figured it out. Engineers like Kim Do-hyun had spent years learning how each alien technology worked, then writing incredibly complex programs that translated between all the different systems. They were like universal interpreters, making sure that when the Velkari power generators sent energy to the Zentari weapons, everything worked perfectly. Now those human interpreters were gone, and the station's systems were trying to talk to each other in languages they couldn't understand. The result was chaos. The attack came without warning. In the early morning hours on the border planet Kepler 9, the sky suddenly filled with black warships, bearing the skull-like symbol of the Skarn Empire. The planet's defense systems tried to send out a distress call, but it was too late. Within minutes, the Skarn had landed troops and begun their invasion. News of the attack reached the Galactic Council's military headquarters just as Admiral Korthax was sitting down for his morning briefing. The proud hegemony officer had been commanding fleets for over 200 years and had never lost a major battle. His blue skin turned pale as he read the emergency reports flooding in. "Ready the Third Fleet for immediate deployment," Korthax ordered his staff. "And activate the Tactical Coordination Network. We'll show these Skarn dogs what happens when they mess with Council territory." But when his communications officer tried to bring up the tactical network, nothing happened. The massive holographic display that usually showed the positions of every ship in the fleet remained dark and empty. "Sir, the coordination system isn't responding," the officer reported nervously. "All I'm getting is an error message that says, 'Human oversight required for multi-species fleet operations.'" Korthax felt a cold dread in his stomach. For decades, human officers like Captain Song Hana had been quietly managing the complex computer systems that allowed different alien fleets to work together. Each species had their own way of building ships, their own tactics, and their own communication methods. Getting them all to fight as one unified force should have been impossible, but the humans had somehow made it work. They had written programs that could translate between dozens of different military languages, coordinate the movements of thousands of ships at once, and adjust battle plans in real time as conditions changed. It was like having a brilliant general and a supercomputer working together as one mind. Now that mind was gone, and Korthax was about to learn just how helpless his forces were without it. The Third Fleet reached Kepler 9 12 hours later, but what should have been a coordinated rescue operation turned into a complete disaster. The hegemony ships arrived first and immediately began attacking the Skarn vessels in orbit. But when the Zentari reinforcements showed up 30 minutes later, their ships almost collided with the hegemony forces because nobody had told them where to position themselves. "Why aren't you following the battle plan?" Admiral Korthax demanded over the communication channel. "What battle plan?" came the confused reply from Zentari Commander Vexel. "We never received any tactical data. Our computers can't read your navigation systems." Things got worse when the Velkari heavy cruisers arrived. Their weapons operated on completely different frequencies than everyone else's shields, which meant they kept accidentally hitting their own allies instead of the enemy. Meanwhile, the insectoid hive ships were flying in their traditional swarm patterns, but without human coordination software to tell everyone else where the swarms were going. The other fleets kept getting in their way. The Skarn commanders couldn't believe what they were seeing. The mighty Galactic Council fleets, which had been feared across the galaxy for generations, were fighting like a bunch of confused amateurs. Ships were crashing into each other, firing at the wrong targets, and flying around in complete chaos. "This has to be some kind of trick," muttered Skarn General Tekmor as he watched from his command ship. No military force could be this incompetent, but it wasn't a trick. Within 6 hours, Admiral Korthax had lost nearly half his fleet. The survivors were forced to retreat in shame, leaving Kepler-9 to fall to the Skarn invaders. The news of the defeat spread quickly through Skarn space. Emperor Vakthul himself called an emergency meeting of his war council. "If the council forces are truly this weak without their human allies," the Emperor declared, his scarred face twisting into a cruel smile, "then now is the time to strike. Prepare the Grand Fleet. We march on the core worlds within the week." The Idea real horror began on New Terra, one of the most successful multi-species colonies in the galaxy. The planet was home to over 50 million beings from dozens of different worlds, all living together in perfect harmony. What made this possible was an incredibly complex atmospheric processing system that could create the exact air mixture that every species needed to survive. Colony Governor Thexmar had always been proud of how smoothly everything ran on his world. The Velkari breathed methane, the Zentari needed high oxygen levels, and the crystalline Vorthak required trace amounts of silicon dust in the air. Somehow, the atmospheric processors managed to create perfect conditions for everyone simultaneously. But, on the morning after the human withdrawal, alarms started blaring in the Environmental Control Center. Chief Technician Klikvor stared at the warning displays in growing panic. The atmospheric processors were showing dozens of error messages, all written in human technical language that none of his staff could understand. "Where's Choi Dayun?" Klikvor demanded. "Get her on the communicator right now." But Choi Dayun, the human environmental engineer who had designed and maintained the atmospheric systems for the past 15 years, was already on a transport ship, heading back to Earth. Her replacement had been scheduled to arrive next month, but now there would be no replacement. Within hours, the delicate balance began to collapse. The Velkari district started experiencing oxygen poisoning, while the Zentari neighborhoods were filling with toxic gases. Panic spread through the colony as millions of beings realized they might not be able to breathe their own air much longer. The disaster on New Terra was just the beginning. Across the galaxy, the quantum communication grid was experiencing unprecedented failures. This wasn't just any communication system, it was the technological marvel that allowed instant communication between star systems separated by thousands of light years. The problem was that the grid connected dozens of different alien communication technologies. The Hive used bioorganic neural networks, the Primarch communicated through crystalline resonance frequencies, and the energy beings transmitted pure thought patterns. Getting all these incompatible systems to work together had been considered impossible until human technician Yoon Seojin created her revolutionary translation matrices. Yoon had spent 10 years studying every form of alien communication in the galaxy. She understood not just how each species talked to each other, but how they actually thought. Her translation programs didn't just convert words from one language to another, they converted entire ways of understanding reality. Now with Yoon and her team gone, the quantum network was rapidly falling apart. Messages sent from Centauri Prime were arriving at their destinations as complete gibberish. Entire sectors were losing communication with the rest of the galaxy. The universal translator systems that had allowed different species to understand each other for decades were displaying nothing but error codes. But the most shocking disaster was happening at the Great Library on Arkiva Prime. This massive facility contained the collected knowledge of galactic civilization going back millions of years. Every important discovery, every piece of literature, every historical record from hundreds of worlds was stored in its quantum databases. Head librarian Velthara had always been proud of the library's incredible collection. Scholars from across the galaxy came here to study ancient texts and lost technologies. The facility's search systems could instantly find any piece of information from the vast archives. What Velthara didn't realize was that much of this miraculous efficiency came from human-created language processing systems. Linguists like Park Min-jae and Kim Hyeju had spent years developing programs that could translate between thousands of different alien languages, including many that were considered dead or extinct. These translation matrices weren't just simple word-for-word converters. They understood context, cultural references, and even ancient slang from civilizations that had been gone for millennia. They could take a scientific paper written by a long-dead Primarch researcher and make it perfectly understandable to a modern hive scholar. Now those systems were shutting down automatically. Every day, more sections of the Great Library became unreadable. Ancient Velkari poetry turned into meaningless symbols. Zentari historical records became incomprehensible blocks of text. Millions of years of accumulated knowledge were becoming as useless as books, written in languages that no one could read. Velthara stood in her office, watching helplessly as her life's work crumbled around her. The irony wasn't lost on her. The species that everyone had called primitive younglings had been the only ones capable of truly understanding and preserving the wisdom of the ancient civilizations. Chancellor. Vorthak paced back and forth in his private chambers, his purple tentacles writhing with frustration. The reports coming in from across the galaxy were getting worse by the hour. Entire sectors were going dark. The economy was in free fall, and the Skarn Empire was advancing deeper into Council territory with each passing day. "This is ridiculous," Vorthak muttered to himself. "They're just humans. How can one primitive species cause this much chaos?" He activated his personal communicator and called for his aid. "Prepare my fastest diplomatic vessel. I'm going to Earth personally to end this nonsense." But when Vorthak's ship arrived at the edge of the Sol system 3 days later, what he found shocked him to his core. Every single human world and space station was surrounded by shimmering energy barriers that his sensors couldn't even identify. The defensive shields were unlike anything in the galactic databases. They seemed to bend space itself around the protected areas. "Magnificent," whispered Vorthak's ship captain, a veteran hegemony officer who had seen every type of military technology in the galaxy. "I've never seen defensive systems like these. How did the humans develop such advanced technology without anyone knowing?" Vorthak ordered his communications officer to send a priority message to Earth. Surely the humans would be reasonable once they understood the desperate situation facing the galaxy. The response came back almost immediately, but it wasn't from any human leader. Instead, it was a polite automated message that played in perfect galactic standard. "Humanity is currently unavailable for diplomatic contact. We will consider resuming relations when the Galactic Council is prepared to treat us as equal partners rather than subordinates. Thank you for your understanding." "Equal partners?" Vorthak roared, his tentacles turning a darker shade of purple. "We've ruled this galaxy for millions of years. We don't negotiate with children." He tried sending dozens of different messages, each one more demanding than the last. He offered trade deals, threatened economic sanctions, and even hinted at military action. Every single message received the same polite automated response. After 3 days of getting nowhere, Vorthak was forced to return to the council headquarters in humiliation. The news of his failure spread quickly, and an emergency session was called immediately. The council chamber was in chaos. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting at each other in their native languages, creating a cacophony of hisses, clicks, roars, and electronic buzzes. Some delegates were demanding immediate action, while others were arguing for completely opposite approaches. Admiral Krextar of the militant hegemony faction slammed his armored fist on his podium. "This is exactly what I warned you about. We should never have allowed these upstart humans to integrate into our civilization. Now they think they can hold the entire galaxy hostage." His scarred face twisted with rage as he continued. "I say we gather the Grand Fleet and show them what happens to species that defy the Council. We'll blast through their pathetic shields and drag their leaders back here in chains." But Trade Representative Velsara of the Pragmatic Commercial Union stood up immediately to oppose him. Her silver scales shimmered as she spoke in a calm, measured voice that cut through the chaos. "You're talking about starting a war with the species that apparently runs half our infrastructure," she said coldly. "Have you seen the economic reports, Admiral? Without human involvement, our trade networks are collapsing. Our medical systems are failing. Our own military can barely coordinate a simple patrol mission." She gestured to the holographic displays showing the economic data. "The humans aren't holding us hostage, they're simply not helping us anymore. And apparently, we can't function without their help." The chamber erupted again as different factions started taking sides. The warrior species like the hegemony and the Skarn wanted military action. The trader species and the intellectuals were arguing for negotiation and compromise. Chancellor Vorthak tried to restore order, but for the first time in his long career, nobody was listening to him. The younger delegates were openly questioning his leadership, while the older ones were retreating into their traditional isolationist positions. As the arguing continued late into the night, one terrible truth was becoming clear to everyone in the chamber. The Galactic Council was falling apart, and somehow the primitive humans held all the cards. Chancellor Vorthak had barely slept in 3 days. The reports flooding his office painted a picture of complete disaster across the galaxy. Trade routes were paralyzed, colonies were dying, and his own military commanders were sending increasingly desperate messages about their inability to function without human support. "This has gone far enough," Vorthak declared to his senior staff. "I'm going to Earth myself to talk sense into these stubborn humans. Prepare the fastest ship in the diplomatic fleet." His aide, a nervous centauri named Kethvar, looked worried. "Chancellor, perhaps we should send a formal apology first." The humans seemed quite upset when they left. "Apologize?" Vorthak's tentacles writhed with indignation. "I am the leader of the most ancient and powerful civilization in the galaxy. I don't apologize to species that were still living in caves, when my people were building star empires. The journey to the Sol system took 2 days at maximum speed." Vorthak spent the entire trip rehearsing the stern lecture he would give the human leaders about their childish behavior and their responsibility to the galactic community. But when his ship dropped out of hyperspace at the edge of Earth's solar system, Vorthak's confidence evaporated instantly. Every single human world was surrounded by massive energy barriers that seemed to shimmer and bend the very fabric of space around them. The defensive shields were unlike anything in the galactic technology databases. "By the ancient stars," whispered Captain Zethel, a veteran officer who had served in dozens of military campaigns. "I've never seen defensive technology like this. How did the humans develop such advanced systems without our knowledge?" Vorthak stared at the screens in growing unease. The barriers around Earth, Mars, and the human colonies weren't just energy shields. They seemed to be folding space itself, creating impossible geometric patterns that hurt to look at directly. "Send a priority diplomatic message to the human." "Government," Vorthak ordered, trying to keep his voice steady. "Tell them the Chancellor of the Galactic Council requests immediate audience with their leadership." The response came back within minutes, but it wasn't from any human leader. Instead, a calm automated voice spoke in perfect galactic standard. "Humanity is currently unavailable for diplomatic contact. We will consider resuming relations when the Galactic Council is prepared to treat us as equal partners rather than subordinates. Thank you for your understanding." "Equal partners," Vorthak roared, his purple skin darkening with rage. "We've been the guardians of galactic civilization for millions of years. We don't negotiate with species that learned to fly between stars yesterday." He tried sending increasingly angry messages over the next several hours. He offered trade concessions, threatened economic sanctions, and finally hinted at military action if the humans didn't come to their senses immediately. Every single message received the exact same, polite automated response. It was as if the humans had simply written him off as unworthy of actual conversation. After 3 humiliating days of being ignored, Vorthak was forced to return to the council headquarters empty-handed. News of his failure spread through the political networks before his ship had even docked, and an emergency session was called within hours of his arrival. The council chamber was in complete chaos when Vorthak entered. Representatives from dozens of species were shouting at each other across the curved rows of seats. The normally dignified atmosphere had dissolved into something resembling a riot. Admiral Krextar of the militant hegemony faction was standing on his seat, his scarred blue face twisted with fury. "I told you this would happen," he bellowed over the noise. "We never should have trusted these primitive humans. Now they think they can dictate terms to their betters." He pointed one clawed finger at the ceiling as if he could see through it. "To the human worlds beyond, I say we assemble every warship in the Council fleet and show them what happens to upstart species that forget their place. We'll blast through their fancy shields and drag their leaders back here in chains." But Trade Representative Velsara of the Commercial Union was already on her feet, her silver scales flashing as she moved. "You want to start a war with the only species that seems capable of keeping our civilization running?" she asked with icy calm. She activated a holographic display showing the economic disaster reports. "Look at these numbers, Admiral. Without human coordination, our shipping networks are paralyzed. Without human medical research, plagues are spreading unchecked. Without human technical expertise, our own space stations are falling apart." Her voice grew louder as she continued. "The humans aren't holding us hostage. They're simply not helping to us anymore. And apparently we're completely helpless without their assistance." The chamber erupted into even louder arguments as different factions chose sides. The warrior cultures supported military action, while the merchant species argued for immediate negotiation and compromise. Deep in the intelligence archives of the Galactic Council, analyst Kethvar was working through his 3rd sleepless night in a row. As Chancellor Vorthak's personal aide, he had been tasked with preparing a comprehensive report on humanity's role in galactic affairs. What he was discovering in the classified files was making his hands shake. "This can't be right," Kethvar muttered to himself as he pulled up another classified document. His silver Centauri features were drawn with exhaustion, but he couldn't stop reading. Each file he opened revealed another shocking truth about human involvement in galactic civilization. He started with the medical breakthroughs that had saved billions of lives over the past 50 years. The cure for the Andromedan plague that had threatened to wipe out entire star systems. The primary research had been done by Dr. Kim Yuna and her team on Earth. The revolutionary cancer treatment that worked on 17 different alien biologies, developed by human scientist Park Jinsu, working in secret collaboration with alien researchers. But the official records say these discoveries came from the Hegemony Medical Institute, Kethvar whispered, checking the public databases. The human contributions had been completely hidden from the general galactic population. He moved on to military records, and what he found there made his blood run cold. Every major council victory in the past 30 years had one thing in common: human, strategic advisors. The brilliant defensive campaign that stopped the Skarn Empire's last invasion, planned by human tactician Lee Minho. The successful siege of the pirate stronghold at Vega Station, coordinated by Captain Song Hana using her revolutionary multi-species battle coordination software. The files showed that human military advisors hadn't just been helping, they had been quietly running the entire Council defense network. They had developed the communication protocols that allowed different alien species to fight together effectively. They had created the supply chain management systems that kept fleets supplied across vast distances. They had even designed the diplomatic strategies that prevented wars from starting in the first place. But the most shocking discoveries came when Kethvar started looking into colonial administration records. Planet after planet showed the same pattern. Successful multi-species colonies invariably had human administrators working behind the scenes. On New Harmony, where 15 different species lived together in complete peace, the official governor was a respected Primarch elder named Vexthal. But the classified records showed that the real work was being done by human administrator OG1, who had spent years learning the cultural traditions of every species on the planet. She had quietly resolved thousands of potential conflicts before they could escalate, all while allowing the alien governor to take credit for the colony's success. The same pattern repeated across dozens of worlds. Human diplomats, engineers, and administrators were the invisible force keeping multi-species societies functioning smoothly. They understood alien psychology better than the aliens understood themselves, and they used that knowledge to prevent conflicts that could have torn colonies apart. Kethvar's discoveries got even more disturbing when he accessed the economic databases. The galactic trade network that everyone assumed was run by the ancient commercial union. The core algorithms had been written by human programmer Yoon Seojin. The currency exchange systems that allowed hundreds of different alien economies to trade with each other. Designed by human economist Park Do-hyun. Even the entertainment industry showed human fingerprints everywhere. The most popular holodramas in the galaxy were secretly written by human storytellers who understood what would appeal to different alien cultures. The music that played in spaceports across known space was composed by human musicians who had studied alien aesthetic preferences for decades. As dawn broke over the council headquarters, Kethvar sat back in his chair and stared at the mountain of evidence he had compiled. The truth was undeniable and terrifying. Humanity hadn't just been participating in galactic civilization, they had been running it from the shadows. Every time the Council had congratulated itself on its wisdom and leadership, humans had been doing the actual work. Every time alien leaders had taken credit for great achievements, human experts had been the ones making those achievements possible. Kethvar began typing his final report with trembling fingers. The conclusion was devastating but unavoidable. For the past 50 years, the Galactic Council has not been leading galactic civilization. We have been passengers aboard a ship operated entirely by humans, too arrogant and blind to realize that we had given up control of our own destiny. He paused, then added one final line that would change everything. Without human involvement, we are not a galactic civilization at all. We are just a collection of primitive species pretending to be something we're not. The collapse of galactic civilization accelerated with each passing day. On the ancient Primarch homeworld of Crystalis Prime, something unthinkable was happening. The lights were going out. Elder Vexthal stood in his crystal palace, watching in horror as entire districts of his city plunged into darkness. The Primarch had ruled the galaxy for over 2 million years, and their homeworld had never experienced a power failure in recorded history. Their crystalline technology was supposed to be perfect, eternal, and self-maintaining. How is this possible? Vexthal demanded of his chief engineer, a younger Primarch named Kethel. Our power grid was designed to last forever. Kethel's normally radiant crystal body was flickering weakly with stress. Elder, we've discovered that the maintenance protocols we've been using for the past 30 years were actually written by human engineer Kim Do-hyun. Our own people never fully understood how he integrated our crystal technology with the galactic power network. The terrible truth was spreading across Primarch space. For decades, human technicians had been quietly maintaining and upgrading their ancient systems, making them compatible with modern galactic technology. The Primarch had been so proud of their superior technology that they never bothered to learn how the humans were keeping it running. Now, without those human maintenance crews, their perfect crystal cities were dying. The power grids that had functioned flawlessly for millennia were shutting down section by section. Even worse, the Primarch were discovering that they had forgotten how to fix their own technology. Meanwhile, in the military headquarters of the proud hegemony, Admiral Kregstar was learning an equally humiliating lesson. The warrior species that had dominated galactic battlefields for generations was being systematically destroyed by the advancing Skarn Empire. "Report!" Kregstar barked at his subordinate as another fleet limped back from a devastating defeat. Captain Zethmore, his armor scorched and his pride shattered, could barely meet his admiral's eyes. "Sir, we lost the entire 3rd battle group at Rigel Station. The Skarn are using coordinated swarm tactics, and our ships, we can't respond effectively." The problem was simple but devastating. For 30 years, the hegemony military had relied on human-designed tactical coordination systems. Their own traditional battle strategies hadn't been used since before most of the current officers were born. When the humans left, the hegemony had been forced to revert to their ancient pre-contact fighting methods. Those methods had been effective 200 years ago, but they were laughably primitive compared to modern warfare. Hegemony ships that should have been working together in perfect coordination were instead fighting like individual warriors, each captain trying to win personal glory instead of following a unified strategy. The Skarn, meanwhile, had been preparing for this moment for years. They had always known that the Council's military effectiveness depended on human coordination, so they had developed tactics specifically designed to exploit the chaos that would result if that coordination disappeared. Back at the Council headquarters, the emergency session had been going on for 18 straight hours. The chamber was packed with delegates from every member species, and the mood was uglier than anything in recorded galactic history. Young delegate Velsara of the Commercial Union stood up, her voice cutting through the chaos. "Chancellor Vorthak, your administration has led us into the worst crisis in galactic history. Our economy is destroyed, our military is in shambles, and our infrastructure is collapsing. How do you intend to fix this disaster?" Vorthak's purple tentacles writhed with fury. "The humans are to blame for this crisis, not the Council. They abandoned their responsibilities to the galactic community." But Representative Kethzar of the Centauri Coalition wasn't having it. According to the intelligence reports, the humans weren't just helping us, they were doing everything while we took credit for their work. We've been lying to ourselves for decades. The chamber erupted as delegate after delegate stood up to condemn Vorthak's leadership. Even the ancient species that normally supported the traditional power structure were turning against him. Elder Thexvar of the Crystalline Collective, whose species was older than most of the others combined, rose slowly from his seat. "In 2 million years of galactic civilization, my people have never seen such incompetent leadership. Chancellor Vorthak must resign immediately." What happened next was unprecedented in galactic history. One by one, every single delegate in Phi. The chamber stood up and called for Vorthak's removal. The militant hegemony, the ancient Primarch, the proud Crystalline Collective, the practical Commercial Union, species that had been enemies for millennia, were suddenly united in their demand for new leadership. When the vote was called, the result was unanimous: 847 votes for removal, 0 votes against. For the first time in recorded galactic history, every single member species had agreed on something. As Vorthak was escorted from the chamber in disgrace, the terrible irony wasn't lost on anyone present. It had taken the complete collapse of their civilization to finally bring the alien species together, and it was all because they had driven away the one species that could actually make everything work. The new Chancellor Kethvar sat alone in his office, staring at the blank message screen before him. Outside his windows, he could see the lights of the capital city flickering as another power grid failed. The reports on his desk painted a picture of complete civilizational collapse, entire star systems going dark, colonies being abandoned, and the Skarn Empire advancing unopposed through council space. He had been elected unanimously just hours earlier, but Kethvar knew he had inherited an impossible situation. The proud species that had ruled the galaxy for millions of years were now completely helpless without human assistance. The question was whether humanity would even be willing to listen after months of insults and dismissive treatment. Taking a deep breath, Kethvar began typing the most important message of his career. "To the government and people of humanity, I am Chancellor Kethvar of the Galactic Council, recently elected to replace the previous administration. On behalf of all member species, I formally apologize for our treatment of humanity during the recent negotiations. We were wrong to dismiss your contributions and demand your subservience. We humbly request your return to the galactic community and ask what terms would be acceptable for renewed cooperation." The message was transmitted to Earth using one of the few remaining functional communication relays. For 3 days there, was no response. Kethavar began to wonder if the humans would simply ignore them forever, leaving the galaxy to collapse completely. Then, on the fourth day, a single human ship appeared at the edge of Council space. It was Ambassador Park Jin's personal diplomatic vessel, the same one that had carried the human delegation away from the failed peace talks. Park Jin's image appeared on the communication screen in the council chamber, and Kethavar was struck by how calm and composed the human ambassador looked. There was no anger in his eyes, no desire for revenge, just the quiet confidence of someone who held all the cards and knew it. "Chancellor Kethavar," Jin began, his voice measured and professional, "we have received your apology and your request for renewed cooperation. Humanity is willing to return to the galactic community, but only under specific conditions." Kethavar leaned forward eagerly. "Name your terms, Ambassador. We're prepared to discuss anything." Jin's expression didn't change. "First, humanity will be granted full voting rights in the Council, with representation proportional to our population and economic contribution, not based on how long our species has been spacefaring. Second, humans will hold permanent seats on all major committees, including military command, economic planning, and scientific research. Third, the Council will formally recognize that a species' age does not determine the value of their contributions to galactic civilization. The terms were actually quite reasonable, Kethavar realized. The humans weren't demanding dominance or seeking revenge. They just wanted to be treated as equals. "These terms are acceptable," Kethavar replied immediately. "When can we expect humanity to resume its roles in maintaining galactic infrastructure?" "Immediately," Jin answered. As if on cue, hundreds of human ships began emerging from the Sol system's defensive barriers. The vessels spread out across the galaxy, heading for critical infrastructure points that had been failing since the human withdrawal. On New Terra, environmental engineer Choi Daeun's ship docked at the atmospheric processing station. Within hours, the complex life support systems were functioning perfectly again, and 50 million colonists could finally breathe easily. At the Galactic Trade Hub, programmer Yoon Seo-jin and her team reactivated the coordination networks that managed interstellar commerce. Almost immediately, the massive traffic jams of cargo ships began to clear as the automated systems came back online. In the military sector, Captain Song Hana's tactical specialists reconnected with the Council fleets that were desperately trying to hold back the Skarn advance. Within days, the chaotic alien forces were once again functioning as a coordinated military machine. But the most important moment came when Ambassador Jin addressed the full Council for the first time since humanity's return. The chamber was packed with delegates who had finally learned to appreciate what they had almost lost forever. "Fellow members of the Galactic Council," Jin began, his voice carrying clearly through the chamber, "humanity has returned not as your superiors but as your partners. We never wanted to rule the galaxy. We just wanted to be part of it as equals." He paused, looking around at the alien faces that were now listening with respectful attention instead of condescending amusement. "Let this crisis be a lesson to all of us," Jin continued. "Wisdom is not measured by how many millennia your species has existed. It's measured by what you choose to do with the time you have and how you treat those who are willing to help you build something better together." The chamber erupted in unanimous applause, another first in galactic history, and, as human ships continued their work of rebuilding civilization across the stars, everyone understood that the galaxy had finally learned to value partnership over pride.